Welcome everyone to Rocket Ask Me Anything. Today we are super excited to welcome special guests from Red Airship, which is one of the top software consultancies in Singapore. We have Brecht, who is a senior engineering manager at Red Airship with lots of experience as a software engineer and an engineering manager. And we have Sarah, who is his sidekick for today, who is the people and culture specialist at Red Airship. Brecht is originally from Belgium. He's been living in Singapore for many years and has a good understanding of the Singapore tech ecosystem. And he has prepared some background information about himself. He'll be sharing about how to find a workplace where you thrive today. And afterward, we will open it up to Q&A. Without further ado, I'll hand it off to Brecht.
Okay, thanks for having me today. I'll be talking about how to find a workplace where you thrive. I'm hoping to give you some insights on what decisions you can make or things to take note of so that hopefully you can also find a workplace where you thrive. I'm here today with Sarah. As mentioned, Sarah is my sidekick, the people and culture specialist. After the intro, I will talk a bit about what you can do before you get an offer. What are the things you can see for how can you identify if it's a good place for you? What to do in your first week, and then what actually to do after your first week, how you can continue to thrive. So about me, my name is Brecht. I worked previously basically doing web design and development, teaching similarly to what you're going through in Rocket Academy. I have since been working at a few startups in Singapore, been in Singapore since 2015, and been working at Red Airship since 2017. So I started initially as a senior front-end engineer, and currently I'm a senior software engineering manager. So I went from the individual contributor track to the management track. So what is Red Airship? It started in 2013. It's a team of designers and developers with the mission to improve people's lives through design and technology. That's the mission, but what do we actually do on a daily basis? We design and build web applications, mobile applications, and some other things. The key takeaways for the company is that we have been 100% working remotely since 2020, even before the mandatory lockdowns and all that happened. We are quite a diverse team, and we have one of the highest lifetime retention rates in the industry, with more than 90% of the lifetime retention. Then here you can see some of the diverse team we have. I'm very grateful to be able to work with all these amazing people. So yeah, you could be part of it at some point as well. You can see it's fully remote from different countries, different nationalities. So I'll be talking about what you can identify before you get an offer, like how do you identify a place where that suits you, where you can continue to thrive. Throughout the slides, there will be some QR codes that lead to more resources. So feel free to take on your phone and scan the QR codes so that for later you have a reading list to read more about. So one of the things that you need to be mindful about, like during the interview process, even before you actually are at a company, how can you identify if it's something good for you, is to be mindful, different companies have different company cultures. So I had listed a few here. They're not necessarily good and bad. It's just two ends of a spectrum. So for example, there's the cubicle versus open floor space concept. So a cubicle is where you maybe just by yourself. There's a cubicle with two people. Whereas open floor space is where it's really open. You can see everyone. There's a lot of hustle and bustle. So you might think cubicle, or that's the old school way of doing things, and open floor space is the hip and new and trendy thing. But that's not necessarily a good and a bad thing. For example, if you like being focused at work, easily distracted, then a cubicle might actually be better for you. If you're the kind that like to socialize throughout your work, have some chit chat, be able to just walk over to other people, then an open floor space might be more for you. So it's not necessarily one is better than the other. It's really knowing what you prefer yourself and then making choices based on that. So there's also this collaborative versus competitive culture. Collaborative is I'm fully collaborative. That's really my thing. I'm not competitive at all. I don't like competitive games. I really like the collaborative games. So collaborative, you mainly see that in smaller companies like startups. Because it's you're all in it together, it's sink or swim. The next day you could run out of money, so you all try to make sure that you can continue the business, keep a business afloat. Whereas competitive, larger companies where you don't even know each other, people are more like a number. you will be graded, or your performance might be based on your peers. So it's like you kind of against your peers or other departments in terms of performance. So that might be a good thing, that might be a bad thing. It really depends on what you're looking for. Another thing is like the work from office versus the work from home, or hybrid nowadays is like maybe 2 days office, 3 days home, or some other arrangement. Again, there's no good or wrong. Work from office could be very great. You're meeting people, you get out of your house. Could be very bad. It could be like you not like being stuck in traffic jams. You might think like work from home is great, right? Don't need to be stuck in traffic jams. But there might also be an issue there in terms of you might, it's great to just roll out of bed and start work. It's not so great if you roll out of bed and start work. Like there might not be any space for you to actually draw a line between work and your personal life, or you might have noisy neighbors that distract you. So maybe hybrid hot desking is what we use at Red Airship. So like, although you might have some of these work from home issues, we give the opportunity to actually go hot desking, to be away from the usual. So if you're interested in how we do this, you can ask questions later during the pigeonhole. Anything like that, I can talk more about if that's what interests you. Then there's the job scope exposure, either very deep or very wide. Like if you go to established companies, it might be very deep, meaning you maybe focus on like getting the performance of the transactions like just that tiny bit faster, the checkout process, for example, to increase conversion rate. Whereas in startups, it might be more like very wide, like one day you can be a front-end developer, the next day you do some back-end. For me, I've been mainly working at startups. So at one of the companies I worked at, I was actually a front-end developer, but I also did the UI design, also did some sales engineer. I go to investor pitches. So like you can get exposure to quite a lot of things. It just depends what you want to do. You want to get very good at one particular thing, or you just want to get exposed to many different things and then find out which one is the best for you. Tech stack, there's a legacy or cutting edge. Like if you like the legacy technologies like maybe Java, .NET, then that's something you should be looking for. Like, is this company going to use that, what I like? Or it could also be like cutting edge. Like I personally, I don't like working with Java or .NET. I really like working with the more open source technologies. So that's where I would take a look at. This product versus service company, the main difference is product is that you have like more stability in terms of rhythm, like sprints. You have more steady, the velocity is roughly the same, whereas a service company is like really project driven. Depending on the client, you might have tight deadlines. It could be you have periods that you have nothing to do, for example. That one is much more fluctuating. So that's something that you might want to keep in mind as well. And then stability versus growth, like depending on your stage in life, you might want to have job stability, or you might want to have that hustle and bustle, that excitement of like being one of the first employees to then build like the next unicorn. So that's just something to keep in mind what you're looking for. What to look out for in terms of red flags. So one of the things is like overtime. Overtime is not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you're in the tech industry, like if you do deployments are usually off peak, like late at night. So it's sometimes unavoidable. But like you need to keep in mind, like some companies have like just every day is overtime. There's no normal time. There's like this thing called the 996 culture. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. But 996 culture means like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. It originating from Chinese companies. So you can find out about this, like, and again, like even if you work at a Chinese company or a 996 culture company, it might heavily depend on your team. Not every part in the company is the same way. So that's just something to take note of. As well as Japanese companies, they have this culture where you don't leave until your boss leaves. And just to take note that your boss will also only leave after his or her boss leaves. So like nobody leaves the company until like the very top boss leaves the office. So that's just something to take note of, whether that's something for you or not. Another key thing is like, have you met the working team, or more like HR people only during your interview process? When you speak to HR or maybe the boss only, it could be like a very rosy picture of how life will be at the company, what technology they use. But then when you actually start the first day, you start realizing, I don't like these people. It's not what was promised. We don't actually use this technology. So it's good to make sure that you meet the working team before you actually accept an offer. So at Ridership, what we have in the interview process, we have a group interview at the end, just to make sure that you can see who you'll be working with, ask any questions, both work related or personal, just to get to see whether you're the right fit. If you're interested to find out more about that, do ask in the questions, then we can get back to that. A boss versus a leader, your direct manager that you'll be working for, is that more like a boss person, meaning like will micromanage, will boss you around? Or is that like an actual leader, like interested in your personal growth and help you get the best out of you? Another key thing is like the churn rate, retention rate. Like how fast are people leaving the company? How long do they stay at the company? If there's a lot of turnover, it's like you're going to build your working relationship on people that maybe not there the next day. So that's something to keep in mind. If this is high turnover rate, might not be a good company to work at. And then like growth, learning opportunities. If you're going to work at a company, what are you going to learn? Is there something interesting that you can take away from it? Like even if the company would go bankrupt, is there something that you will take away with you after that? Or is it just there for the money or the prestige? Yeah, and then engineering excellence. Is it a good company like to help you grow your career? Like do they have a tech stack that interests you? So that was it before like you get offered. Then the next phase is like what you do in your first week. There was a good presentation. I think the last time at Rocket Academy by Robert from Glyn's about some soft skills. So if you haven't watched that one, definitely do so. But besides what he mentioned, there's like some things to get to know the people, right? Sometimes it's not about what you know, but it's about who you know. Find someone that you can be buddies with. So that person will help you address some questions like the unwritten rules about maybe how do we do this? Who should I call for that? Who should I speak to? What's the process for me to get something? So make sure that you find a buddy to get you like up to speed really fast. Don't wait for other people to come to you because that might not really happen depending on the company. And try to contribute something in your first week, like make one commit or do something. And if you say like, well, I can't do that because I can't even get the project to run. Well, that in itself is an opportunity to fill in the gaps in the documentation so that find out how you can get it to run, update the documentation so that the next person actually has a more smooth sailing to get started with the project. And also flag out if you need any help or have nothing to do. Like don't sit there, wait for the people to come to you. Because it won't happen. And what will happen is like, oh, this person is just wasting time, doesn't even speak up. So be proactive. Make sure that if you need help to flag it out. And even if like you finish your task, don't be afraid to say like, hey, I finished my task if there's something else for me to do. People will appreciate that. Sometimes there's just nothing to do. That's fine. But yeah, at least be proactive about it. So after your first week, when to move on, right? Like it's nice. You had a great time at this company. Should I stay or should I go? There's this thing called job hopping. So job hopping in Singapore in this industry is about 1 to 2 years. And then people move on to the next company, right? Every move can give you an average about 15%. It depends a bit on the situation, but you could have a 15% salary increase. So job hopping might be useful. If you're interested to find out how I think about this, leave a question. Then we can talk about it as a hiring manager and give you some tips about that. So when to move on, to me, there's like 3 points. There's learn, earn, or burn. So learning is like you should get a job that you learn things in. This is a fast moving industry. So if you don't learn things on a daily basis, you probably outpaced by other people who just graduated or who picked up the new technology. So do focus on learning a lot, be open-minded. Because more experience leads to more money eventually, and better job opportunities as well. There's this other thing, earning. Make sure you're fairly compensated. You shouldn't be working for free. A lot of people will maximize earning, but the thing you need to be, and that's fine, right? You ask for raises, be proactive, but be careful about not earning a lot more than what you have learned. Meaning that you can get golden handcuffs, like you can pay a lot of money for actually no knowledge. And that makes it very hard to move on to a different company. So you kind of like stuck. So I had someone that applied for a job and a big tech company, like worked at a big tech company, say, like, to put it simply, maybe earned like 10K expected salary, and all they had to do was press a button. It's very specialized work. It was very boring work. That's why it was paid very high. But applied to my company. The culture fit was great, but then obviously the amount of money asked for didn't relate to the skill set what we could bring to the team. So unfortunately, we couldn't. The person was used to a certain lifestyle. Then it is not working. So like, just be mindful about that to make sure. I personally prefer earning slightly lesser than the maximum what I think I should be earning. So I have very easy to switch job if need be. Then the last thing, yeah, just for reference, I've been at this company for 5 years, so I didn't need to move. But it's always good to know that you're not stuck in a job. You can basically move more freely, and you're not addicted to the money. The last thing is burning. So like, if you're not learning and you're not earning, then basically you're just burning. You're like wasting your time. You might as well leave that job and look for a better opportunity. So here you see like a QR code. For those who are interested, very interesting article about the guy talking about his journey, how he doubled his money or his salary in 10 years time, and how his attitude and how to make that happen. So there's a few links in the article, very useful to take a look. So this is like, you've been working at the company during that time, or even at the first day of your work, or even after a few years working at the same company. There's a few things to keep note of, watching out for yourself. So there's like this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is where you have like very little experience or expertise. Yes.
Hey, Brett, sorry to interrupt. Some students are asking, will the slides be shared so they can access the QR codes and those kinds of things afterward?
We can see to share it later.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So the Dunning-Kruger effect is like where you have little experience or knowledge, but you have a lot of confidence. Like you see on the top is like the peak of Mount Stupid. And then after that, as you get more experience, you start to realize that actually, there's so much more to learn. I don't know that much. I'm actually an idiot compared to these other people. And that's called the Valley of Despair. And then as you get more and more knowledge, your confidence starts to grow again. So what causes the Dunning-Kruger effect? It's lack of skill. Like, you don't know what you don't know. Lack of insight. You don't even know what knowledge do you need to know about. So like, for example, in engineering, like you can write a for loop, right? And you think like, wow, I'm the greatest for loop writer, I can write this like so optimal. But it's lack of skill. You don't even know that there are other tricks to write it even more efficient. Or it can be a lack of insight. You don't even know there's actually a while loop, a do while loop. There's so many things about it, that's these 2 points. And another cause of Dunning-Kruger is like, it continues because you continue to underperform. Why? Because you think yourself is so great, you're so confident. Why should you listen to the feedback from others? Like, they're not right, you're right, they're wrong. If you reject their feedback, you don't have an opportunity to further improve, and you will keep going into the Dunning-Kruger effect. So what does that mean for you? Like a summary, basically means like having limited expertise, yet you think you're an expert. The more you know, the more you know that you don't know. So that's something to keep note of. And how does it actually impact you or the people around you? It's overestimating ability and underestimating the time needed. So like, when you have a sprint, you will say like, oh, actually, in reality, the work takes 5 days, but you think, oh, this takes only 1 day because I'm so great, I can do this. And then you will fail to meet your commitments. So that might lead to bad performance and ultimately maybe a project failure. Companies that recruit people who seem very confident during the job interview, right? You can't test for everything. So they might actually have recruit people that they think like have very capable, but then when they actually start the job, they might have difficulty filling the actual job role. And like mentioned, if you don't respond well to feedback, you're not going to improve. And also finally realizing, if that's your case, for example, you might actually realize like, wow, I got hired for this job, but I really can't do this. This is much too much for me. So you might get desperate or have feelings of failure. To realize is like, it can happen to you. It can happen to anyone at any point in time. So this could be your colleague, right? This could be your manager that is going through the Dunning-Kruger effect. When I just started out, I graduated, I started out, I had this great ability to make pixel perfect UIs in web design. CSS had no secrets for me. I thought it was great. I can make anything in Internet Explorer 6. So I was like the best, right? I think I was top 5% in the world as web designer. And then I started to realize there's also this thing called jQuery, and there's also this thing called JavaScript. And wow, there's like a whole world of front-end engineering that I didn't know about. So it can happen to anyone at any time. How can you break the cycle? Challenge your own beliefs. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions to learn more, and learn from feedback. Take every feedback, learn from it. It could be right, it could be wrong, but at least listen to it and reflect on it to see whether there's something that maybe there's some truth in it. The next one is the imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome is where you think that in this whole room, like I'm the idiot, like everyone is so amazing, and I'm an idiot. I don't belong here, right? Like when you're in school, it could happen in school during academics. It could happen at a workplace. Could happen anywhere. It's like basically at the top 5%, and then you're with everyone who's the top 5%. Some of these top 5% people actually are the top 1%, right? So it's not uncommon to have you feeling like you're not as great as everyone else, right? And that's fine. So for the imposter syndromes, what are some of the signs? It's like not believing you earned your success through your own effort. Like for example, I got into this company because they didn't ask about these parts that I didn't know. They just asked the questions that were lucky, and that's why I got in. Or when you actually at your work and like, oh, all these people are brilliant. They know so much. I have yet so much to learn. So these are some of the signs. So what does it mean for you? It's like despite having actually the knowledge and skills, you still feel inadequate. You think everyone else but you is amazing, and you have like this fear of being discovered, right? You're the imposter, like Among Us. At any point they can go might find out that I'm not the real person here, right? So how does that impact? It could be underestimating ability and overestimating time needed. Like you say, like this thing might take 5 days, but actually it only will take 1 day, just to give yourself some buffer, some breather space. When you do costing for a client, that means you might not get the project because it's over budget. So that might lead to bad performance and also ultimately project failure. So you might feel like living in fear of being discovered and self-isolated. For me, actually, the imposter is like anytime it happens from in school, happens during the work. It's like anytime I think everyone else has it much harder than I have. I'm always lucky in the classes I take. I'm always lucky in the projects I'm on, and everyone else's project is much harder. But reality is that when you actually get on that project, you realize it's not that hard. Like it's the same as what you've been on. So how to break the cycle is to focus on the facts. What's actually the reality? Share how you're feeling. Very important. Like you think you're the only one that doesn't know how things go. But once you share it, you realize that this is software engineering, right? This is life. We haven't solved every problem. It's not just a copy and paste job. If it was, we could just automate it, right? You wouldn't be a software engineer. So a lot of the problems we solve are maybe the first time we actually solve it. So you don't know in advance the solution until you start working on it. So do share it so that you can actually get some feedback. And sometimes they might say like, actually, you didn't do bad. You were great. Just take that positive feedback as like, oh, maybe it is, I should take it. Or maybe they say like, yeah, actually you suck, but this is what you can do better. Just learn from that feedback and improve. So like you won't know which one it is until you start listening to people and share how you feel. If you want to read more, there's the article right there. The last one is burnout. What is burnout? It's like the syndrome that's resulting from chronic stress that's not been successfully managed. So it's not just stress, right? It's not just having a bad day at work, like, oh, I don't want to do this job, but it's more like chronically being stressed out. So stress versus burnout, what are the key differences? Is like stress is like you have deadlines to meet, you're trying to meet it, you feel like anxious about it. Whereas burnout is like, no matter how much time you put in, you feel hopeless. Like, I'm not going to meet that deadline. I don't feel interested anymore. Like, what's the point of this, right? The stress is like, it might kill you prematurely. Like, you have such heart attacks from it, so much stress. Whereas burnout is like, well, what's the point? Like, what's the point in living? This is not worth it anymore, right? So causes of burnout, there's a few different: lifestyle, personality, but I'll focus on the work related. So work related is like when you have a micromanager, like you have little or no control over your work. Like the goalposts keep shifting, the milestones keep shifting, like you never can complete your work, can lead to burnout. Lack of recognition, like no matter how much effort you put in, you're going to never actually complete anything. Or like even monotonous or unchallenging job, like say every day pressing a button. At some point you go like, oh, what's the point? Like I'd rather die. Like there's no point in me clicking this button. Or could also be like a chaotic or high pressure environment. Like you need to keep performing. Like it's like a rat race. And the bottom 5% keep getting fired. At some point, you are the bottom 5%, right? That might also lead to burnout. So the 9 signs or more signs for burnout is mainly the ones I want to focus on is like extra hours. You feel like you need to put in extra hours to compensate, like slowly drifting, putting in more time to accomplish the same job. Persistent fatigue, no matter how much you sleep, and even outside of work, you have thoughts that are focused on work. And then that might lead to mood swings. So for me, when I had a problem, like some coding problem, then I would try to like solve it, right? And it's very normal. You spend some hours, you can't solve it, you take a break, you can go back at it, and eventually you will solve it. But if this happens over long periods of time, it might be like every time you spend, oh, I'll do after dinner, I'll do another few hours, I can solve it, and then you start to like at night lose sleep over it, wake up in the middle of the night thinking about that problem. And over time, what will happen is that you lose sleep, you need more time and effort to actually solve simple problems. And then when you get to that, it's like you can have like mood swings because you feel irritated or sad. Like there's no matter how much effort you put in, you're not going to complete it, right? It's like you're this idiot, you can't do a simple task. And as a slippery slope, over time, you would have more and more easier tasks that you can't accomplish. You spend more and more time to try and accomplish it, and leading to even less sleep, less looking after yourself. So like you start drinking more coffee to stay awake during the night, right? Because you need to spend more time working on this problem. And also, like as you get more fatigued, you probably will eat less healthy. Like, oh, I better don't spend time cooking or ordering food. I'll just eat like some cookies because that's the easiest, right? I need to save my time so I can focus on this problem. And that will lead over time, like your body feeling less nourished, less sleep, your mental health will suffer. So how to break the cycle? On the top left, you can see like there's a QR code to do a self-assessment. It will give you like a scale from 1 to 50, how severely you might be having a burnout. And then how to break the cycle is to turn to other people, like talk about it, so that other people might be able to offload some of your tasks to be able to give you a break. Make exercise a priority. Like for me, I thought like, oh, I go for walks, right? I go for walks after work, which is when it's dark. But what I realized is that although Singapore is a sunny country, there is people are vitamin D deficient, and that leads to memory issues, like a lot of issues that you wouldn't think, even like blurred vision, that kind of stuff. So do also walk in the day or exercise in the day, actually get some sunlight, very important. And make sure that you eat and drink well, fuel your body for the performance that it needs, right? Yeah, so if you want to read more, there's an article there. So to wrap this up, what actually is, like, we talked about differences in when you go a group interview or company interviews, see how it is like for you. It's all about preferences, right? What do you prefer? And there's like this theory is called the 4 burners theory. It's just like you have these 4 burners: health, work, family, and friends. You can only have a finite amount of fuel you can burn at a single time. So you could burn 100% for one burner, but the other 3 will be 0. Or you can maybe do 25 for each burner. So it's basically what you focus on, where you spend most of your energy is what you will see the most improvement, but it will negatively impact the other areas in your life. So when you're young, maybe you think like, oh, focus a lot on work. Work is important, build career, but that might be to the detriment of your health. When you get older, you maybe want to have a family, have kids and stuff. So that mean like maybe you need to dial back on the friends, dial back on the work, prioritize your family. So in the end, it's just all about the balance, right? What is the workplace where you thrive is basically what suits you best. It's not a one size fit all kind of approach. Me personally, I'm like a workaholic. I spend 80-90% of my time on work, and my health is 0 or 1%. If I could not eat or drink, I would, so that's not the best way. So don't follow me. Learn from my mistakes. To prioritize health as well. Family and friends also important. So work is not the end all and be all. I try to improve that myself as well. So before we get to the Q&A, yeah, do as I say, not as I do. So before we get to the Q&A, some good points or tips for you to get to know people, right? Socialize, network. There's some Telegram groups which I would recommend depending on where your preference is. DevSG is like a channel for engineers, like if you have some technical questions or you want to find out more about jobs or how it's like working at a certain company. That's number one. Number two is like if you're interested in like front-end development and design, get more exposed to that is number two, Design SG. Number three is like if you're into product development, you want to maybe become a product manager, help build products, not on a technical or on a design side, but really like prioritizing stakeholder management. Then that might be a group for you. There's some other groups like Crypto Tech SG if you're into crypto, and DevOps SG if you're into DevOps. But you can find me in those groups. Reach out to me and I can definitely share the links for those as well. And the last one is to apply for jobs we have open at Red Airship. We regularly have more jobs open. I think we just recently finished like a whole batch of hiring. So we try to pace ourselves not to hire too much so we can preserve the culture and have keep the place a company where you can thrive. Okay, that's it for me. We can get to the Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks, Breck, for sharing. And I think Dylan asked earlier whether the slides will be shared. We'll share what we can after the talk. So you'll have notes from the slides as well. There were a lot of questions on the Q&A. I'm really, it's one of the most questions that we've had recently. So it's really great. Thanks everyone for posting the questions. And there's lots of upvoting going on. So Brecht, I think you have access to that link as well. So I'm going to be grouping questions from that. And most of the questions are around choosing jobs and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to get started and we'll see where we go. Shannan had a question. You staying in one company for 5 years is the antithesis of the current trends of job switching to get higher pay raises. What enticed you to continue staying at one company for as long as you did?
Yeah, good question. Like why if there's more money outside by job hopping, why we would stay at the current place? Like to me, it's not all about making the most money. Although that might be the current trend, right? Like just optimize how much money you can make in a job. To me, it's very important. Like I say, on my 4 burners, work is very high. I put in a lot of energy. I want to have a positive impact on the people and the society if I can, but mainly like the people around me. So it very resonate with me with Red Airship that the company is still aligned with what I want. And I had a lot of interesting learning opportunities along the way. I went from senior front-end engineer to senior engineering manager. I went from solving technical problems to solving people problems. So I really enjoy like the flexibility, all the benefits it offers. Might not be the financially or career-wise like the best on my CV, but it's really like a place where I feel I can thrive and enjoy. I have not had a single day where I actually felt like I had to work. So
that's amazing. Shannan, did you have follow-up questions to that?
Yeah, we can just move on to other questions first.
Okay. Related to job switching, everyone's thinking about jobs. Is there a good time or a bad time economically to job switch? Some of us, we know that now we're going into a recessionary period. Uh, looking at market conditions, is there a good time to job switch or bad time?
Well, if the market economy is doing great, it's much easier to job hop and be sure that you'll still be there, right? Used to be a time where you be at a company and you would be sure that you would stay there, like they wouldn't fire you. But nowadays, people are like, it could be after this call, you could get like said, oh, today was your last day. So you know, nothing is for sure. But like the key thing I would ask is like if you go with big companies, just see how they have been handling in the past. Have they been firing people? Like what's the culture they're like? If it's like a startup, the key thing to ask is how much runway do they have? Like imagine there's no more funding coming in. How long can the company survive? Usually it's like a few months or 2 years, but it gives you a good idea. Like, should you make the jump to that company? I have a stable job, or I think stable job here. Is it worth for me to jump for that, knowing that it might anytime be fired?
Shannon, does that answer your question?
Yeah, so I have a follow-up question is that internally, do you have objectively, do you have a matrix for you to evaluate maybe if this fulfills 70% of what I want, and I'll just continue staying. If this drops below like 50%, then maybe I'll evaluate something like that. Like, do you have like internal metrics to test that out?
So you mean like for me personally, whether I want to stay at this company?
Yeah.
I don't really have a matrix. But like I really like when I feel like I'm no longer aligned with the company where the company is heading, or if I feel like there's no more learning opportunity and I'm also not earning. That one is very simple. I'm not learning and I'm not earning. I can get elsewhere a lot more money. I would definitely switch. But like as long as I feel like I'm still aligned with the company, that's the reason for me to stay.
Okay, thanks.
Dylan had a great question. How do we know that we are fairly compensated? Dylan brought up this trend, 15% for every 2 years raise. Is there a benchmark for that? How do we go about thinking about compensation?
To be fairly compensated, being like expecting to get 15% raise every 2 years staying at the same company.
Maybe Dylan, you can elaborate?
I mean, you were talking about people, like the target should be like 15% for every like 2 years and everything. I think this is because I'm based in Indonesia. I don't really know if like the current status in Indonesia is the same thing as it is in Singapore or as it is in other countries. So what is like fair?
So if you talk about job hopping, it's not really the target about 15%, but it's more like on average what you can think to get by job hopping. It really depends on the situation. Like maybe market economy going bad, you might not get as much, or your skill set is actually not that high in demand anymore, might not get as much. So like the 15% is just to give you an idea of like there's actually a considerable amount that you could get by job hopping. But is the hop worth the, you know, is it worth
the everything else? Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does actually. Thank you.
And then Shannon had a related question, right? So Shannon's doing really well in his job. They've given him more responsibilities, and he's wondering, Shannon, you can elaborate.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a pretty loaded question. So I just joined the company, and I think they are giving me more responsibility. So it's more of a role expansion rather than a sort of like a title promotion to like engineering 2. So how do you benchmark that? Like I've done a lot of reading, and I don't know how to like pitch that against. Yeah, there's no internal like rate card for this, so I'm not sure how am I supposed to negotiate for this.
So like they already give you a promotion, and then you want to establish how much you get.
Extension. Yeah.
So like they did not reach out to you themselves, like we're going to give you a pay increase, like kind of like more like a formal promotion, like you go from level 1 to level 2, this will be your new salary.
Yeah, it's not a formal promotion, but for example, like I'm leading the team now. It's not really like a promotion to another grade. It's more like take up more responsibility. So we feel that perhaps you should be compensated more, but I'm not sure like how do you negotiate for this increase?
Okay, so but is this like, is the company talking to you about like how much you want the increase, or is this like you feel like you should be paid more because you take on more responsibility?
So they have reached out, but they have not come up with a figure yet. So
Okay.
like
Well-
I think advantage is on my side to perhaps raise a figure.
Well, if the moment you raise a figure, they're not going to increase above that, right?
Yeah.
So let them come up with a figure first, and then you can see whether you feel aligned with that. If you really don't feel aligned, like one is depending on the company size. Like if it's a bigger company, you could, even if you're aligned with that number, you could still ask, actually, I expected more. You could try your luck. They're not likely going to fire you because you asked for more, because they wanted to give you more responsibility. But if they give you an offer and it's really not what you want, then you should speak out. But like my thing is always, you should prioritize learning over earning. So like even if you don't get paid a lot more, just the fact that you get that more responsibility, you can go to another job, another company, showing that you have led the team, and they will, if you really work yourself, they will pay you more. Like, you can easily job hop.
Oh, that's great advice. Thanks so much.
That's golden advice right there. All right. Hertanto had a great question. Can you share more about your transition to engineering manager? Do you still code?
So do I still code? No. My life went from seeing the code editor almost 24/7 is to now seeing Zoom calls 24/7. So I'm more like talking to people, replying to messages, making sure that things go smooth, having one-on-ones with my team, making sure that Unblock help them with their career development. Basically, like how I'm giving tips here, sharing some of my experiences is also what I do with the people. Whether I'm managing them directly or I'm just working with them. I'm really passionate about people and improving processes. How I went, like I started at a small company, like Weathership at the time I joined was maybe like about 15 people. Big, now we are about 40 people. So as you take on more responsibility, right, like there's a certain point the team gets bigger. I naturally stepped up to look after the people, help them. I see there's like things, nobody asked me to step up. Nobody told me like, oh, you're going to get paid more if you do this. I just naturally felt like this is where I can help. This is where I can add a lot of value. So I started doing that. And over time, people notice that the value you're contributing. If the people don't notice the value that you're contributing, you should have a chat with your manager or with your boss, because maybe you're really not adding value. Maybe really you should stop doing what you're doing. You're like disillusioned about what you're doing, or maybe it's like, oh yeah, now you mention it, we didn't notice it, or like it's in the company's benefit to not pay you more, right? As long as you stay and you do more work and you do better work, like why should they pay you more if you don't ask about it? So it's not in the benefit of the company to proactively reach out to you. That's also why I mentioned in the earning part, be proactive. If after a year you get a pay raise, it's not what you feel like is fair compared to other people in the same company, or compared to how much value you add, you should have a chat about that.
Hertanto, does that answer your question?
Yeah, but I actually, because I read articles, right? And then a lot of people say that, when you switch to engineering manager, it's kind of like a totally different job. You don't, like you mentioned, right? You don't even code anymore. And so there's kind of like a disconnect. Like, aren't you supposed to be doing all the technical stuff first to become an engineering manager? But once you become an engineering manager, you actually kind of lose like all the technical stuff. It's kind of more difficult to switch back, actually.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a lot of things to unpack. So for as the people that think like, oh, I should become a management track, right? That's where the money is, can boss people around. That's not the reason why it should be management track. Management track is like where you realize that you're more passionate about solving people problems than it is about technical problems. If you're very interested in just solving technical problems, that's really your passion, stick with that. Become like a staff engineer, principal engineer, really go that track. As a manager, you don't code that much, but depending on the company or at all. but the technical background is still very valuable when you solve or like you coaching your juniors. So see it as like as a senior engineer, you're mentoring juniors, right? Engineering management is like the mentoring part on steroids, as well as doing the interfacing with clients or other stakeholders, the management. So if you enjoy the mentoring of the juniors, like really like you're senior engineer, what do you enjoy more? Spending time with juniors that screw up your code and help them improve, or do you more like actually writing the code yourself? I think there's a very good benchmark to see which way you should go further after senior engineer. In my opinion, before you can be an engineering manager, you should be a senior engineer for a few years, so that you have enough experience to guide your people that report to you. You don't want to be the manager that you don't want to solve every problem for them, but you want to have enough of a base to be able to have meaningful conversations with them so it can help them help themselves.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Brad. Shannon has more great questions. Are there technical need to knows other than algorithms that we should continue honing to be valuable as we progress in our careers?
Okay, so for me personally, I'm a front-end engineer. I did back-end before, so I'm not that great at technical stuff, right? I just happen to be in engineering and stuff. That's my imposter syndrome talking. So I'm never really good at algorithms, and I don't think algorithms is that important. It really depends on what company and what role you want to do. Like how many times do you do binary tree search and that kind of like as a front-end engineer, I don't, so like besides algorithm, it's more about the foundations, like the fundamentals, like for example, for JavaScript, how does the event loop work? What's bubbling? Those kind of fundamentals that will help you. Why does this code not work? Rather than how can I more optimally write the code? The key thing is to get things to work, and then you can figure out the more you do it, how to improve on it. But like some companies, they all only have algo questions, right? So if you want to get in there, you need to do the algo questions.
So maybe from a front end, since your specialty, at least before being a manager, was front end, what are some of those front end things, or how would you what I guess technologies or frameworks or concepts would you recommend people continue honing? From a front-end perspective,
it's more about the ability to learn rather than the knowledge you currently have. It's like how fast can you pick up a new framework? How fast can you get started the ground running with the experience that you have? How can you transfer to something new? The technology changes so fast. Like if you were great at jQuery no longer used. There's no React, there's Vue. Angular is also phasing out, like not so popular in Singapore. Maybe the next one is Svelte or something else, like the change is very fast, and it's more about how fast can you transfer your knowledge to pick up the next thing, and learning the fundamentals, like what's actually JavaScript, how does it actually work, all the quirks, all the things you take for granted, how does that work? Having a good understanding of that will definitely help you picking up new things, because it's just the same but different.
Shannon, does that answer your question?
Yep. Thanks.
Great. I'm going to transition to a question that Brian asked, actually, which I love, which is about company culture. So we're in the beginning of your presentation earlier, you're talking about company culture and the different types of cultures we can expect different companies. How can, when students are looking out for red flags, how can companies improve? How can companies improve? This is it's like a management book right here, but how can companies address some of these red flags?
So that means like you try to change your companies just so they're no longer red flags or something, like you kind of like try to game the system.
Brian, maybe you can elaborate.
I think not so much gaming the system, but I also ask this in context of like students, like our current students moving out into various companies, and if they slowly start rising in the ladder, then how can they also ensure a healthier culture, especially when change management is so difficult with a much bigger company, right? But then it also has to happen from like a small team setting all the way up the management ladder. And so how do we be that fail safe, that stopgap in between, right? If we want to continue pushing like this idea of a healthy working culture.
Okay, so the first things first is that the culture, any culture is a good culture, right? It's just whether it aligns with you or it doesn't align with you. Like imagine a culture where basically culture is like the worst behavior a group of people tolerate. So for example, spitting, if we all tolerate spitting, then our culture will be that spitting is the normal thing. You might think that's a bad thing, right? But at the other hand, it gives you freedom. Like you are allowed to spit and nobody would look back at it. The other kind is like, oh, I like to be in a culture where people say hi to everyone the moment they pass by each other on the street. That could be nice, right? A lot of positivity. On the other hand, it could be like, wow, I can't look at my phone because every time I pass by someone, if I don't say hi back, it's like negative, people look at me weird. So there's no good or wrong in culture. It's more about which one do you align closest to. And so, like I said, culture is like the worst behavior we as a group of people tolerate. The same thing like with having meetings start early or people be late for meetings. It's whatever you tolerate that becomes the norm. You allow people to join late. More people will join late, and that becomes like the culture. People will know like I don't need to start on time because nobody will be there. So that's what culture is about. So if you feel strongly that the company you're in does not align with what you want, then you probably it's not the right company for you, right? But if you feel like there's some small things that you could improve, like I say, it's like what a group of people tolerate. It's not just management says this is how it's going to be, and that's suddenly magically overnight, that's how the culture transforms, right? That's not how culture transforms. It's really people feeling they believe in the same values, the same thing. They feel like that's what I want to be part of, and then they will start exhibiting the behavior of that thing. So if it's a big company, you should start small within your own team, and everything starts with yourself, right? You want change, you should be the change. If other people agree with you, they will follow you. If other people don't agree with you, you should change the group of people you're with, change company that actually do follow, like that align with you. And that's kind of how I see how you get great culture, the one that you feel is great.
Ryan, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's a really great answer. Thanks.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay. Coming up to a few more questions on the pigeonhole. Have you considered stepping away? And I love this question because some of our students are entrepreneurial and interested in doing their own thing at some point in their careers, if not immediately after the bootcamp. And Shanan's question is, have you considered stepping away from the comforts of a full-time job and building a startup? What would form the foundations to make that switch?
What do you mean by what would form the foundations?
Shanan?
So I guess at the start of your career, you mentioned you were doing a lot of things like pre-sales, front end, talking to customers, building your product sense. For someone who joins like a large organization who goes very, very specialized, they might not have this experience to actually convert it into a startup so I guess to start something up, you need some form of experience, and not every engineer in different companies will get the same experience. So I guess the first question is, will you do a switch? And if you do a switch, will you say that you are ready to do that switch?
If I would do a switch, I would do a switch if I feel very passionate about the new thing I would be starting on. Like if the values at the company are not longer as aligning as much as what I would have in my new company, my new startup or whatever. Maybe there's some charity I'm very passionate about, or like some cause I'm very passionate about. If I would feel like that passion is more than what I currently feel at the job, the company I am, that might be a reason for me to take the jump and actually work harder, because that's what passion is. Then the second question was?
So I guess like, what kind of skills do you need to actually start a startup? Software engineering kind of a startup.
You need to be foolish enough to take the risk, but you need to have people. This is a bit more related to startup, right? So if you have a startup, you need to have the right co-founders that you can go, that take you quite a while and that complement you. When you want to build a startup or something from your own, you need to see what is your edge, right? You can have like the hacker, the hipster, and the hustler, right? The hustler being like very easy with people, making deals, get connections, get buy-in, you know. The hacker being like the one that can anything, just give a problem, they can solve it technically wise, you know, write the code overnight and it magically works. And then the hipster, the one that can make things pop, you know, make it look pretty, make it look smooth. But you need to find out what is your strength, like and each person has a different strength. For me, it's like I really care about people. I can really kind of like rally people, get them the best out of them, get them to see why they should join something, and they get something back from it, right? Other people, they might be better with financial stuff, or you know, like, so it's like different people. You just need to know yourself and how you fit in, whether you find the right team to work with. The people first, the rest will follow later. But obviously you need to find the money to sustain long enough to.
I guess you condense it really well into like three kind of identities. Just having this tree should form the foundation to start something. All right, thanks.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, thank you. I just want to end. I want to be mindful of time because we're coming up to the hour. I just want to end off on Dewi's questions about advice for people who are looking into the front end field. Since I guess we were talking, Brecht's specialty in the past was front end. What are the top tools that front end engineers use currently, and what do you look for in front end engineers who are starting out nowadays?
What are some of the top tools? Like just any code editor, like Visual Studio Code or something free will do. The browser, like Google Chrome or Firefox, have the debugger tool there. The console. You know, there's so many hidden gems into that, like for performance, to call stack, anything like that. It's very good to keep track of that. And yeah, what thing to pick up? Just for Singapore, you want to get into frontend, React is a safe bet. It's been a few years, it will probably be another few years. But for other than that, like there's Vue. Like if you go to Europe, you go to the China market, Vue is more popular than React, for example. So it really depends on where you want to go. Angular, historically, what I've based on my experience is those companies that use Java as a backend, they were more keen on adopting Angular as a front end. So it depends, like if you're also interested in Java, that kind of culture, maybe Angular might be a thing. But in Singapore, if you have to only pick one, it's React, and then just explore from there, like Svelte, like other new technologies that come about. Make some projects in it, try it out, see whether you like it or you don't like it. Yeah.
Is there something like, you know, like you mentioned, like for the backend, like, you know, people have like need code and all this HackerRank, you know, to practice on. Is there an equivalent for like front end engineers? Are there like sort of, I don't know, like a front end sort of equivalent hackathon kind of thing to like how to design a certain layout or something like that?
Okay, so like I don't know any front end lead code. Generally, I don't believe in lead code. You know, because those are algos. I believe in like making sure that whatever you build actually satisfy a need for the user. Like not so much about how performant it is. It shouldn't be slow, but it should be like good for what the user expects. If it's very fast, but it's not enjoying the user, like it's not what the user expects, it's still not enjoyable, right? But I don't think that anything like lead code for frontend, but there are like quite a few different like pet projects that are there, like using Flexbox, learning how to use Flexbox, like moving a frog by using different kind of code, CSS code. So those kind of things are good to practice how to position things, that kind of stuff. Or like write games, like there's this thing called Scripts JS, which is like you have like this little features, and then you can write the AI for it, like harvest food, battle, how many things to generate, how the body parts should be combined. That's like helps you with maybe thinking in JavaScript, like some kind of lead code in terms of visual JavaScript training. Like some of these kind of mini games to play in code that hone your skills also.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brecht.